Hey, welcome back to Politically Disengaged by Cortez, and I'm Cortez. On today's episode, we're talking about democracy dollars. Corporate interests and money have overtaken our government for a very long time now. We even measure our country's success based upon the bottom line of these corporations, as discussed in my video, Human-Centered Capitalism. Andrew Yang has an idea to get the government back to benefiting the people.
Donald Trump's our president in part because many Americans have given up hope that DC is responding to us. And that is not an irrational concern because the feedback mechanism truly has broken down. Corporate interests and lobbyists have the ear of our legislators, and we're all looking up wondering what happened. There was a headline in one of those satirical publications that said that we should hire our own lobbyist to represent us, because that's the only way anything would get done for us anymore. Money is speaking very, very loudly in our nation's capital, and that's what we have to try and change. I know you're here today because you believe Citizens United was a grievous error that has damaged our democracy very badly, and I couldn't agree more. We need to overturn Citizens United, but then we have to go even further, because the fact is corporate money had its run of DC even before Citizens United. So how do we counter the almighty dollar's influence in our nation's capital? What we do is we unify the people and the money. Right now, 5% or fewer of us donate to political candidates and campaigns. So what we have to do is put money into our hands, democracy dollars that only we can give to candidates and campaigns every single year. 100 democracy dollars, use it or lose it, that you can give to whomever you'd like each calendar year. If we did this, what percentage of Americans would give to candidates and campaigns? Not 100, Americans are lazy. But you'd certainly get it up from 5% to what? 30, 40, 50%? At 50%, we would wash out all lobbyist cash by a factor of 4 to 1. Money talks in this country. The problem is that it's speaking for the companies. We have to have the money speak for the people. And so if you have democracy dollars in our hands, this is actually the way we can restore our government to ourselves and give ourselves the knowledge that now our legislators respond to us because it's in their financial interest to do so. Because if you get 10,000 of us together, that's $1 million for that legislator. And then when the company says, hey, I've got 25, 50,000 for you, they say, I don't want to turn off my 10,000 voters who are giving me $1 million. This is the only way we're going to actually make our government responsive to us again.
So Andrew Yang wants to give every voter 100 democracy dollars to help return our government back to the people. But before our country had corporate interests, we actually invested into colleges and universities. Until, of course, black people started to go to college. Take a look.
Once upon a time, at colleges all across the United States, tuition was actually free. But with a few exceptions, students and professors mostly looked a lot like this. Unfortunately, right around the time folks at college started looking more like this, politicians like this.
Political correctness has replaced pro-Marxist ideas on too many campuses.
Decided to start investing America's tax dollars, shall we say, elsewhere.
As with mostly everything in America, most of our societal downfalls have been because of racism. Lots of people have a sinking feeling that your vote doesn't matter because corporations or wealthy have the final say. Most of that is correct. Take a look at this video showing how much influence they have had versus the people.
For the last few years, I've had this sense that everything I learned as a kid about how America's government works is completely wrong. But I had no idea how bad things actually were until I saw this one graph. Researchers at Princeton University looked at more than 20 years worth of data to answer a pretty simple question. Does the government represent the people? Now, this is what they found. This axis here represents public support for any given idea. On the left at 0% are ideas that not a single American wants. On the right at 100% are ideas that everyone supports. This axis represents the likelihood of Congress passing a law that reflects any of these ideas, from a 0 to a 100% chance. On this graph, an ideal republic would look like this. If 50% of the public supports an idea, there's a 50% chance of it becoming law. If 80% of us support something, there's an 80% chance. You get the idea. Now, most Americans would probably agree that, with a few exceptions, we should be as close to this ideal as possible. Unfortunately, the way America actually works doesn't even come close. Take an idea that nobody supports, literally nobody, and it has about a 30% chance of becoming federal law. Now, take an incredibly popular idea, the most popular idea this country has ever seen, and there's also about a 30% chance of it becoming law. This means that the number of American voters for or against any idea has no impact on the likelihood that Congress will make it law. Put another way, and I'm just going to quote the Princeton study directly here, the preferences of the average American appear to have only a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. So if you've ever felt like your opinion doesn't matter and that the government doesn't really care what you think, well, you're right. But there's a catch. This flat line only accounts for the bottom 90% of income earners in America. Economic elites, business interests, people who can afford lobbyists, they get their own line. Look at how much closer their line is to the ideal. When they want something, the government is much more likely to do it. And when they don't, they have the power to completely block it from happening, no matter how much the rest of the country supports it. They get what they want, and guess who ends up paying for it? We pay for it with the most expensive healthcare in the world. We pay for it with a tax code that's a complete mess. We pay for it with internet that's slower and more expensive, with wasteful spending, a floundering education system, a catastrophic drug war, and 1 in 5 American children born into poverty. Almost every major issue we face as a nation can be traced back to this graph. How does this happen? Well, just follow the money. Right now, it's perfectly legal to buy political influence in America. Here's how it works. Let's say a big bank wants a law that would force taxpayers to bail them out again if they repeat the exact same reckless behavior that crashed the global economy in 2008. Not exactly the most popular idea with the public, and Congress knows that. That should be the end of it. But that's where the money comes in. It's perfectly legal for our bank to hire a team of lobbyists, whose entire job is to make sure that the government gives the bank what it wants. Then, those lobbyists can track down members of Congress who regulate banks and help raise a ton of money for their re-election campaigns. It's perfectly legal for those lobbyists to offer those same politicians million-dollar jobs at their lobbying firm. Then, those lobbyists can literally write the language of this new bailout law themselves and hand it off to the politician they just buttered up with campaign money and lucrative job offers. And it's perfectly legal for those politicians to take the lobbyist-written language and sneak it through Congress at the last second. So now you've got a law that greatly benefits the banks, and the whole process can start over. This is how a bill becomes a law. A special interest hires some lobbyists, those lobbyists collect campaign contributions, offer jobs, and then write the laws that Congress then passes to help those same special interests. This happens every day on every single issue with politicians of both parties. In the last 5 years alone, the 200 most politically active companies in the United States spent $5.8 billion influencing your government. Those same companies got $4.4 trillion in taxpayer support. And that's trillion, with a T. And that's just the top 200 companies. Never mind every other special interest, every union, every trade association, and every billionaire. Every single one of them can use their money to buy political influence. You know, there's this idea out there that this only became a problem after the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision in 2010. But the data goes back almost 40 years, and the results are clear. Corruption is legal in America. And as long as it is, anyone who can spend money to buy political influence will. The solution here isn't rocket science. Make corruption illegal. We already know Congress won't do it. I mean, one look at this chart will tell you that. What we need is a plan that lets us go around Congress and do what the American people do best. Fix this mess ourselves.
How much money from these corporations and companies are invested into lobbying? According to the Washington Post, Amazon and Facebook spent $17 million to lobby in 2019. And in the past decade, 7 tech giants have spent nearly $500 million in lobbying. Facebook and Amazon have both spent about $80 million each over the past 10 years lobbying in Washington, D.C. Andrew Yang also said that he wanted to end Citizens United. Let's review Citizens
Money in
United.
politics tends to ruffle the feathers of many Americans, and nowhere is it as controversial as it has been with corporate involvement in politics. Some have argued that corporations should have no role whatsoever in politics, while others have felt that a corporation also has protected First Amendment rights. Of course, the First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. So, is the speech of a corporation protected? The landmark Supreme Court case, Citizens United versus the FEC, weighed in on these debates, as well as its ramifications. And to understand Citizens United versus the FEC, it's necessary for us to understand a brief history of campaign finance regulation. From 1907 to 1970, Congress passed numerous pieces of legislation to limit campaign spending. This included limitations on corporate, union, and federal employee involvement in campaign funding. In 1971, Congress further restricted campaign finances by passing the Federal Elections Campaign Act, or FECA, which strengthened the requirements for politicians to publicly report their campaign finances and added limits to the amount of money individuals or groups could donate to candidates. It also led to the creation of the Federal Election Commission, or FEC, to police campaign spending. The trend toward limiting campaign spending took a turn when the Supreme Court struck down part of the FECA in the 1976 case of Buckley v. Vallejo by ruling that restricting independent spending by individuals and groups was a violation of free speech under the First Amendment. Still, in 2002, more campaign regulation came as the Bipartisan Campaign Finance Reform Act, or McCain-Feingold Act, restricted corporations or labor organizations from financing issue-based advertising on behalf of candidates. These are also known as electioneering communications. This brings us to the heated 2008 presidential election and Democratic primary that pitted Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama against each other in a tight race to see who would be the Democratic nominee for president. Citizens United, a nonprofit organization which receives money from private individuals, as well as some corporations, released a film which was highly critical of Hillary Clinton and spent over $1 million doing so. As Citizens United understood, the movie could be considered electioneering communications. They challenged the McCain-Feingold Act before the movie aired, arguing that its provision on electioneering communications violated the First Amendment protections of free speech. Because of the ongoing debate about money in politics, the case went before the Supreme Court in 2010. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that the McCain-Feingold Act's ban on corporate and union expenditures was unconstitutional because it violated freedom of speech. The opinion for the court said, were the court to uphold these restrictions, the government could repress speech by silencing certain voices at any of the various points in the speech process. In the end, the decision allows corporations and unions to spend unlimited sums of money on ads and other political tools. These are often described as soft money within politics, as the money spent is not going directly to a political candidate, but helps that campaign indirectly. It is, however, still illegal for corporations and unions to donate directly to a campaign. The debate continues to rage on to this day, and much controversy continues surrounding the role of corporations and money in politics. As this case and many others show, a Supreme Court decision rarely settles a controversy in the public's mind.
What all this means is that the wealthy can put endless money behind politicians and further their own interests. So the only way to give the power back to the people is to give people a voucher like democracy dollars. That enables the interest to return back to the people. So according to Vox.com, they say that in 2015, Seattle enacted the Initiative 122. Through a property tax, it gives Seattle voters 100 democracy vouchers. Small donations have went from $8,200 in 2015 to $25,000 in 2017, and about 84% have never donated before. So can democracy dollars, term limits, and campaign finance reform help take back our government? I think it has potential if using the democracy dollars is very easy and a streamlined process. Well, that's episode 7. So as always, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my videos. Thank you for watching.